Welcome back to another Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. Hi, Judge. How are you?
Yay.
So today, I want to dedicate this show and talk about Jesse Jackson. He passed away Tuesday, February 17th, I believe, 84 years old. So I want to speak to his legacy and a video. I also want to bring up a video from Hosea Williams from years ago speaking about Jesse Jackson. About the Martin Luther King assassination that involved Jesse Jackson. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to have you speak about Jesse Jackson, his legacy, beneficial to Black America, yay, nay, and just talk to what he meant to America, to American history, Black America, and just his legacy overall.
He was a young man. He did a lot for the movement, as we called it back then. Unfortunately, the things that he did that should speak for themselves have been tarnished because, frankly, the FBI engaged in a very concerted effort, along with certain law enforcement entities and various large cities, to discredit Reverend Jackson. And the fear was that he would somewhat inherit the joint mantles of Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King and continue to galvanize what at that time was looked as anti-war or anti-exclusion rules that were being set up and try to make things fundamentally fair and revitalize labor. That was not looked at as a good thing. So they did a pretty thorough job on trying to discredit him. So a lot of people now think he was a sellout. I can tell you without equivocation that he is not the one that betrayed Dr. King. There's another somebody, and if you're interested into who, Dick Gregory recorded an interview with that person a few months before Dick Gregory, died, which was about a year before the individual who was a preacher died. So you can get the allegations in the interesting declaration that person made about why he ducked back into the Lorraine Motel because he did not wish to be shot when he escorted Dr. King out onto the balcony, and that was before Dr. King got shot. So it is what it is, and as I have said often, be careful who you associate with, because some of the people really ought to be avoided or suppressed because they aren't good for anybody. They're self-serving, and if that means sacrificing you and the cause that you were trying to dedicate yourself to, they will be only too happy to do so for personal advancement.
Have you ever met him?
Who?
Jesse
Jackson? Oh, several occasions. I think it was actually three. I actually sat very next to him on an airplane for several hours on a flight from LA to Chicago or to DC.
Can you tell us quickly about it?
Very interesting. He was a very dedicated person, very concerned. And see, my experience is when he ran for president twice, did pretty well. Donald Trump, amongst other things, assisted him in the process and seems to have furnished free headquarters for him in a number of critical places and assisted him with organizational facilities and resources. So there are some people that have helped us out who are bad-mouthed because those who wish to keep the status quo wish to conceal the fact that somebody was actually doing something worthwhile and get the people who were beneficiaries of those efforts to turn against them. And meanwhile, some people who mean us absolutely no good are being propped up as somehow or another very good for us, which they're not. But
Well,
I was a grown person when this thing went down in 1968. I could vote, buy whiskey, and sign contracts. So I was well aware of the circumstances. And when I became the last judge on the James Earl Ray case, and we got deeply into what was happening with the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I reached my conclusions, a lot of this came out.
well, I want to play this clip here, right? This is interesting.
Okay, let's hear it.
Now, Jesse Jackson did not portray Martin Luther King, but he did something that was disrespectful. I would say that. So, are you familiar with Hosea Williams?
I am.
Okay. So this is him. This probably was recorded either early 2000 or 1990. Play it.
We were in the meeting, and someone said, Reverend Billy Cowles is outside.
He's describing the day that MLK was assassinated.
And he's upset. And Dr. King said, oh my God, I forgot to tell y'all. I promised his wife, who's supposed to be a great soul food cooker, we'd have our feet on her table at 5:30. Now it's 5:45, and we sit in the meeting. Dr. King said, everybody rush, rush, rush. And get ready in a hurry. Let's go. So I ran down and got to my room. My key wouldn't open my door for some strange reason. The limousine that had been loaned to us, I opened my door. I could touch the limousine. And finally I heard the driver tell Dr. King, Dr. King, I advise you get your top coat, because even though I have the car on, it's still chilly. And the last words he said in this world, okay, Jonesy, I'll get my top coat. And I heard this thing say, pow! And I honestly thought someone had thrown a firecracker into the air. And I looked around to rebuke whoever was that stupid. And I heard something, bloop-a-loop, fell up above my head. And I looked up, and his leg was sticking through the rail. Dr. King only wore one type of sock and one type of shoe. And I knew that was him. I said, oh my God, they got it. And then I had to run about 50 feet down and back up, and I got to him. And Ralph was holding his head, and Andy was there. And a guy from Africa who had been traveling with us as a newsman from Africa. We found out later on he was working for the CIA. No, the FBI, working for the FBI. And he'd taken a lot of pictures of Dr. King. And I grabbed him in the throat. I just started choking him, because the bullet hit Dr. King right here. And it went round and cut his medulla oblongata. And I didn't want people to remember Dr. King with half his face shut off. So Andy ran and got a towel. And somehow or another they took one more picture after I made him empty that camera. And it shows Dr. King down with a towel on his face. But I'm going to tell you, I was an expert gunner in World War II. When I ran up on that balcony, and I looked from whence that bullet had to come, the distance of that bullet, and just could feel the wind blowing that day, I said, whomever shot that rifle was one of the best in the world. He shot one bullet. And I believe if Dr. King hadn't moved to go back and get his top coat, the bullet would have hit him between the eyes. The bullet hit him right here. But what happened, and then Ralph said, we'll go in and take him on to the hospital. Jose, you get all the staff together. 3 of us saw it, Dr. King, after he was shot. 3 SLC executive staff members. Andy, Abernathy, and Hosea Williams. Those are the 3 that saw that body. Now listen to that. So I got in the yard, and I was about to lose my cool, because I was thinking if I could take some molecules out there and make me some guns and kill me some white folks. And one man said, now be cool. You're doing the same thing you're promising you'll never do. And I started crying, and then I heard Jesse Jackson say, he told me, Jesse, take our people on to the mountaintop. And that didn't bother me, even though I know Jesse got nowhere near him. And then Jesse said, I held his head in my hand while he died. And that didn't get to me. And then Jesse said, look at my shirt. And I looked around, sure enough, and Jesse Jackson's shirt was drenched in blood. And I realized the only way Jesse could have gotten that blood was stooped down on that floor at the Lorraine Motel and raked that blood off that floor and put that blood on him. And I went crazy. I really tried to kill Jessie. They grabbed us and all that, but that hurt me so bad. The other thing was, when Abernathy came back, says no need of prayer, no need of cry, no need of nothing. He is gone. It's over with. He's gone to glory. And we called the meeting, the staff meeting, and Jessie claimed to have been ill. And Abernathy told him, Jessie, go ahead to the room and relax. Jessie had to have run like hell that room into that airport, because he got out of Memphis to Chicago. All us feeling, everybody was still in the motel. Cut the televisions on the next morning. That was Jesse Jackson in Chicago with that same bloody shirt on, telling that same lie. I've never respected Jesse since that moment. When they shot Dr. King, a black guy come running around that corner saying, he went that way, he went that way. James Earl Ray no more killed Dr. King, and I killed him. And everybody knew it. He was a patsy set up. And the guy said, went that way, went that way. I said, who went that way? He said, that man ran out that building and dropped the rifle on the sidewalk and jumped in a white Mustang, had a red Alabama tag, and took off. Well, hell, I wasn't worried. That's no car in America look like a Mustang, but a Mustang, a white with red Alabama tag. Where's he going? The police have him like that. And I asked that rifle was left on that sidewalk. That was the rifle that James Earl Ray had.
Basically said that was the rifle James L. Ray purchased but did not shoot. That because the bullet from that rifle was not.
Okay, yeah, I know. It was an excellent one.
Yeah.
And I've listened to that before. And I interviewed Dr. Abernathy. I interviewed Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jackson. I got a sworn statement from Reverend Billy Kyles' wife at the time. And I also, at one time, used to represent the chauffeur who was there waiting. And I'm very familiar with the person he's describing that supposedly went on to work with the FBI. I studied his history intensely. Now, what he's saying isn't, well, I'll chalk it down. Let's just say in the lapse of time, his recollection does not match that of certain other people. And you get somebody in the carotid artery complex, they're pretty doggone bloody, even though a lot of the blood did not get on the ground because a lot of it was trapped inside. He had a tear on his side of his face. They shot him right here. They were trying to take a headshot. I don't care what he says about what he did in World War II. It's an easy shot. It's about 45 yards away, which is point blank for shooting deer. So anybody that's been out in deer season and brought back some venison could have made that shot. Elementary. Wasn't hard. Could make it standing up offhand, down on a bench with sandbags. It's a piece of cake. Don't have to make any compensations. It's a straight on shot. I agree with him. It wasn't Ray's rifle because I know what it was. It was an XM21 that the FBI got 5 of in late December on an invoice, a copy of which I possess, several copies. And in late April 1968, when the Justice Department ordered those 5 XM21s returned to the Defense Department, the FBI claimed they lost one, and that is the apparent murder weapon. There's 5,000 rounds of the particularized ammunition that was used to kill King. And I presented this in great detail on one of the flights. I sat next to Jesse Jackson, and he was saying, you know what? Anything I can do, I'll do. Let's get to the bottom of this. I also presented this in a more detailed form to Reverend Abernathy. He said the same thing. Whatever I can do, we need to get to the bottom of this. When I briefed Reverend Kyles and when I briefed Reverend Benjamin Hooks, they said, let sleeping dogs lie. They both used the exact same language. And the interview that Dick Gregory did of Dr. Billy Kyles, or Reverend Billy Kyles, is very informative.
What you're fixing to witness now is the man who came by to get King to take him to dinner. And 30 years later at a press conference, he slipped, because God do baffle your mind sometimes.
Bring the family and march with us. And when I finished sharing with them the last hour of Dr. King's life, a hurry. But that gave me the wonderful privilege of spending the last hour on earth. 3 preachers in a room, Abernathy, King, and Kyles. And we spent that last hour together in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel. The press is always curious, and writers, what went on? What did you talk about? I say, we just talk preacher talk. What preachers talk about when they get together.
Y'all pay real attention to what you're fixing to hear now.
About 5:45, we walked on the balcony, and he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away, so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out.
Thank you.
I turned around and then knocked him back on the balcony.
30 years later, his brother never realized he would slip and say that.
Now, some of what is claimed here is directly contradicted by some of the witnesses that I talked to or had an investigator talk to. What his storyline is does not match. This whole thing about him smearing himself with blood, that is accounted for by several witnesses who gave statements about Jesse Jackson attempting to offer some comfort to King while he's laying there fatally wounded and quickly expiring. And the fact that you got your carotid artery, it ain't exactly being still. There's a lot of blood going on. And what they indicated was, with total disregard for the fact that he was getting blood all over him, he was trying to do something to comfort King. So I wouldn't buy into that story.
So Trump released a statement and he says, Reverend Jesse Jackson is dead at 84. I knew him well long before becoming president. He was a good man with lots of personality, grit, and street smarts. He was very gregarious, someone who truly loved people. Despite the fact that I am falsely and consistently called a racist by the scoundrels and lunatics on the radical left, Democrats all, it was always my pleasure to help Jesse along the way. I provided office space for him and his Rainbow Coalition for years. In the Trump building, at 40 Wall Street responded to his request for help in getting criminal justice reform passed and signed, when no other president would even try. Single-handedly pushed and passed long-term funding for historical Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, which Jesse loved, but also which other presidents would not do. Responded to Jesse's support for opportunity zones, the single most successful economic development package yet approved for Black businesses, for Black businessmen and women, and much more. Jesse was a force of nature like few others before him. He had much to do with the election without acknowledgement or credit of Barack Hussein Obama, a man who Jesse could not stand. He loved his family greatly, and to them I send my deepest sympathies and condolences. Jesse will be missed. President Donald J. Trump.
I'd have no reason to disagree with the president. That's consistent with what Jesse Jackson conveyed to me, that Donald Trump had provided his office space when he ran for president twice and showed that there was a viable opportunity for a Black man to get the nomination, were he given a fair chance. Also, the whole thing about the assistance and all of the rest of it and the opinion about Barack Obama is true. I mean, what you just heard from the president is exactly what Jesse Jackson said to me personally. Now, he knew who I was, and we had been on a podium a time or two speaking at various places. particularly as a commendation or commemoration of the assassination of Dr. King over the years. So we have had spoken at great length about events, but culmination is the concerted hours spent there next to him talking about this, and also as we go.
Presidential nominee Barack Obama. On Sunday, Jackson had just completed an interview with the Fox News channel and made the following comment, he says, in reaction to a recent Obama speech on the morals and responsibilities of African American men. Presidential nominee.
He said he needed balls cut off. And you know what that was about? It was a lie Barack Obama told with a straight face. Jesse Jackson and I had discussed at some length the fact that for the last 50 years, all of the statistics kept by the court show that out of all of the demographics in America, guess which demographic paid its child support most regularly on time? That was black men who were ordered to pay child support following a divorce. Better than everybody in the country. And Obama, on this speech for Father's Day, had gotten up in this assembly in Chicago and said, my brothers, black brothers, you know we need to do better because my African American brothers, we need to do better because we know we pay child support worse than anybody else in the country. And he had an open mic, and he said basically he needs his balls cut off because that's a lie. And what's going on is it was a lie, because the truth of the matter is it was the exact opposite, and Obama ought to have known it. He was pandering to his audience rather than stating the truth, which is, I congratulate my black brothers for being best in this country, in the United States of America, for taking care of their children following child support orders from a divorce. And people don't believe that because of the negative propaganda, and that fool pandered into it. And Jackson was outraged by it. We talked about that.
So I want to read you this here because it's another pandering person, Kamala Harris. So on the 17th, yesterday, on the 17th, when, Jesse Jackson passed away, people, tweet out their condolences, and here she go with her elaborate story. Reverend Jesse Jackson was one of America's greatest patriots. He spent his life summoning all of us who fulfill the promise of America and building coalitions to make the promise real. And then she goes into his bio, a son of Greenville, South Carolina, rose to the civil rights days, blah, 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 blah. Here she goes about herself. As a young law student, I would drive back and forth from Oakland, where I lived, to San Francisco, where I went to school. I had a bumper sticker in the back window of my car that read, Jesse Jackson for president. As I would drive across the Bay Bridge, you would not believe how many people from every walk of life would give me a thumbs up or honk of support. There were small interactions, but they exemplified Reverend Jackson's life work, lifting up the dignity of working people, building community and coalitions, and strengthening our democracy and nation. I was proud to partner with and learn from him on this work throughout my career, and I am so grateful for the time we spent together this January. Reverend Jackson was a selfless leader, mentor, and friend to me and so many others. So I think she's lying, saying that when she drove her car across the Bay Bridge, people will honk their horn because of the sticker. No, I don't believe that. And she also
let's take that. Let's take that. When Jesse Jackson ran for president the first time, how old was she?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe we should do a fact.
She was born in 1964 at the same hospital where my late mother-in-law worked as a pediatric nurse in the delivery room. Same hospital, same delivery room where my last wife was born a few months after that. So let's fast forward and find out when he ran for president and
Oh,
how
he ran
old she
twice
was.
in 1984 and
Yeah.
1988.
Okay, 1984. She was how old?
I don't know. What year was she born? Let's see.
1964. She was 20.
Okay, yeah, 64. She was 20, and she's saying she was a law student.
She wasn't a law student in 1984. She was at Howard University.
But he ran again in 88. So maybe she's talking about 88.
Maybe 88. But, you know, I suspect it's another one of those. I was listening to Tupac in the dorms when Tupac would have been 13 years old. I was listening to Tupac in my dorm room, smoking a joint. You know, that's what she said. But
Right.
Tupac would have been 13 years old at the time.
I want to swing back to Trump. And the reason why I'm making these comparisons, because listen, Jesse Jackson probably couldn't stand Barack Obama, but when he did win the election and his family, when Barack Obama, Michelle, and his kids walked down on that stage in Chicago, Jesse was in the crowd and he had tears in his eyes. But it wasn't so much because I think because Jesse look from where we come from, from where we started to what I'm witnessing today. So there probably were a lot of things that he couldn't stand about Barack and others. But a lot of times in politics, you don't have to air your grievances like that in public. You still have to do business with people you don't like. And so I want to bring in Trump because this was, I would say in the 90s or the late 80s or early 90s when Trump spoke at a Rainbow Push Coalition conference. This was in 1999. Okay, yeah.
I now want to bring forth a friend who, when we opened this Wall Street project and we talked about it, he gave us space at 40 Wall Street, which was to make a statement about our having a presence there. And beyond that, in terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And created for many people a comfort zone when I ran for the presidency in 84 and 88. And many others thought it was either laughable or something to avoid. He came to our business meeting here in New York because he has this sense of the curious and a will to risk to make things better. Who's an effective builder of building to the builder people. Last year he was a part of our workshop, of our panel workshop on what are the challenges and opportunities. And so this, a year later, Donald Trump, for a few minutes, challenges and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities. Donald Trump.
Well, it is an honor to be here, and I was with Jessie last year, and we had a lot of fun, and it was a little different. Jessie started off by saying, most of the wealth in this country is in the hands of a few. And I thought to myself, is that a bad thing? What's wrong with that, Jessie? And he said, listen, I want some office space in your building on Wall Street, because the wall on wall will fall. And I said, it's okay, Jessie, I'll make a good deal with you. I'll get you some space. You'll pay about $40 a foot. And he said, no, I don't want to pay 40. I said, how about 30? No. It was the cheapest deal I ever made in the history of 40 Wall Street. Is that right? He got it for nothing. He's a very tough negotiator. You know that, right? He's a terrific guy. We love him, and I'm here for him. And I will tell you, a large percentage of the people, and especially in construction, that are building these great jobs are black and minorities, and I'm very proud of it. We have close to 25%, and I think the number's going up, and they do a great job. There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is black and minority folks.
Jesse Jackson mentioned to me personally several times how impressed he was with what Donald Trump was doing to help out ordinary folk, including black people. And he verified that. And I have had other people, clients, who talked about how Donald Trump, now President Trump, helped them out even years before that. So it's nothing that was new with the man. He was doing that just as a matter of course, trying to do right with the idea, same one, but for different reasons, that Henry Ford had. He said, I pay my workers enough so they can afford the product that they build. And that was Trump's thing, and that was Jesse's thing, Jesse Jackson's thing. The people that are around that we deal with ought to be put in a position so they can participate in and enjoy what we, or what I, meaning themselves, were working to bring about. And that was a simpatico type thing. I admired it. So, yeah, that happened.
Okay. So let's fast forward though, because this is another clip.
Meanwhile, one other thing too.
Mhm.
See, juxtapose this with what you just saw Trump say at the time. Juxtapose it with what Reverend Jackson said about Donald Trump at the time, and what the press says about him now, and the woke people say about him now, and they love Hillary. But I just mentioned that in 1966, Hillary was there with her parents trying to keep Negroes at the time out of this Chicago suburb.
Right. So here's the question. I want to play this clip here. And this is the question is, why is Jesse Jackson in the recent years talking another tune when it comes to Donald Trump? So let me just play this real quick.
Well, I want to see us in this year use our collective vote to defeat Donald Trump. Trump represents something dangerous to America. Using the presidency for personal gain, without enforcing the environment laws in our Constitution, playing on racial fears. In Africa and the Caribbean are S-holes, you know, the S stands for. It's a Mexican judge is incapable of being judicious. The Charlottesville situation where you had the white supremacists march with tiki lamps, challenging Jews, banning Muslims. He's done some awful stuff to America, and we cannot afford that. We're more isolated in the world. We are isolated from the G7 countries. We're isolated from our neighbors in Canada and Mexico. We deserve better leadership in this. I want to see Trump defeated. Well, I want to.
So he was.
I don't know.
Yeah. So is that just politics? You know, listen, you on that side, I'm on this side. So I got a rep for my side, which means, you know, I'm going to think of something or say something negative about you to push for my side, the Democrats, to win.
Okay, there's an old saying. It says, all's fair in love and war. And as General Clausewitz said in his treatise on war, in German, it's Vom Krieg, he says, war is but the ultimate extension of the political process, and every rule that applies to politics applies to war, and so do the rules of war apply to politics. So one should not be surprised at the methodologies, the statements, and the ins and outs are quite similar. So all's fair in love and war. And I don't know what Reverend Jackson's motivation was at the time, but that's not what he told me about Donald Trump when I sat next to him. And it's not what he apparently said before. Now, in each instance, he could have been puffing, telling a tale, telling the truth for political purposes. So I don't know.
Okay.
I've never had a conversation with him post his having made those remarks, if they're his remarks and not generated by AI.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that because anything's possible now with AI. But yeah, so let me just, you know, in closing here, let me just highlight some of his achievements. You know, public policies and legislative shifts Jesse Jackson helped pass or influence. Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act in 1986, Democrat Party Delegate Reform 1988, Civil Rights Act of 1991, expansion of the Voting Rights Act, corporate economic policies, i.e. affirmative action. So he had his hands in a lot of policies that help benefit specifically Black America and all of America. And he's an influencer. There are some people that consider him one of those boulets, the bad boulets, but I think the majority, all in all, you cannot put him in a category of being a sellout. I would say that.
No, you can't. He put himself on the line. He put himself in harm's way, which is completely like so few others left alive today. There are few that were jeopardized like he was. See, right now, the occasional act that gets out of hand is blown up in the press because it's sensationalistic and it boosts viewing audience recordation in the rating scale. News is becoming entertainment rather than a public service, and people pay a lot of money to advertise on exclusively news shows. That said, we don't know what's going on necessarily these days when people are trying to drive ratings, and they may have all kinds of inflammatory things. And I know you can't rely on them. Digressing, everybody's heard of the OJ trial. Everybody knows Johnny Cochran had a part in it. Well, yours truly represented the youngest person in the whole world on a death row, who's supposed to have been 15 when he was about to be executed. This young person that I represented and got the Arkansas Supreme Court to unanimously set aside his conviction. I was famous for that. That was 45 years, 40 some years ago, 41 years ago. Everybody knew that. They even had it in the promo for the show. Well, somebody sent me an article published in a major newspaper recently where they brought that up, but they didn't mention me. That's like trying to mention the OJ trial and put in Attorney Kardashian, but leave out Johnny Cochran. So they left me completely out of that. They just changed history around. And if you Google it, you might not even find it these days. But it used to be stuff where, hell, I'm in 5 or 6 books mentioning my defense of that young boy. So all of a sudden it went away. So there's no telling what you get from the press. And I just offered that personal anecdote just to explain that what I said when I opened up today, Reverend Jessie Jackson was subject to a massive campaign conducted by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI and his immediate successors to discredit him so he did not pose a risk of becoming somebody that took Dr. King's place. Now, Freedom of Information Act, looking at redacted statements, going to a location down on 14th Street that was opened up as a repository on records for assassinations and assassination attempts and research and review. Trump has opened it up so it's published now, but it used to be you had to make a request and pay for the product or the productive thing. It's all in there about how they tried to discredit Jessie Jackson as they were trying to discredit or did discredit Dr. Martin Luther King. So I think that the people that have a bad impression of him now are to a great extent driven by an engine that was set in motion by somebody who wanted to reduce his influence. That's part of the price that you pay when you interject yourself into something that people don't want you into because you might make a difference. See, when Jackson came along, nobody black had ever run for U.S. president. Shirley Chisholm did one time, but nobody considered that serious. But Jesse Jackson barnstormed across the whole country, and a lot of people understood what was going on and supported that. So that was an uplift to the entire demographic. And that was important because a lot of what power and success are about have to do with self-perception. And he helped it out for black people, or it had just been color transformed the Negro, and Negro transformed to black, transformed to Afro-American, and back to black, and then to African-American, which is a term that some people want to lay at his feet. So he did have his influences profoundly on American culture, and he always did have something to say about the glorification of dysfunction, as I put it, that was so rife in the American communications industry, entertainment industry, etc.
One last thing here, because I don't think we will see another Jesse Jackson in a while. And I don't like to compare that, oh, we need to have another Jesse Jackson. No, I think we should have someone better, but I don't think we're not going to see someone better in a while, because we're too distracted and we're not focused on what's important. And we have too many people like Al Sharpton, who is poisoning the minds, I believe, of Black America. So he did a press conference the day Jesse Jackson passed. His family gave the green light for him to do it. Why do Black Americans continue to prop this Negro up as if he is a spokesperson for us?
We don't. He was sold to us as somebody, and if you tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and mostly the entirety of the communications and news industry is trying to push this on you as this is your guy, then the gullible people who listen to that will say, oh, he's our guy. Where'd you get that? I heard it on CNN.
Should I play a little bit of it or no?
I wish you wouldn't.
Okay.
Because the more you play of him, the more you have that false idea sink into the minds of the gullible.
So in closing, was Jesse Jackson ever a sellout?
I don't think he was. I think what happened from time to time is he had a realistic assessment of what was politically feasible and what was not, and tried to advise people, this isn't necessarily the ideal situation, but it's a political reality. That would have been like FDR and Churchill trying to badmouth Stalin when they were all needing each other's cooperation to get rid of Tojo, Benito, and Adolf.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown. R.I.P. Jesse Jackson.